She had visited her friend's house. He had bought a new computer. She had finished her coffee before she left. Had you seen that famous painting? Had they left for the vacation before you called them? Had they studied for the exam before it started? She had cooked a delicious dinner. Had you finished your chores already? They had cooked dinner when the phone rang. Had she completed her report before the deadline? Had they left for the airport before the taxi arrived? We had found the lost keys. Had you visited that museum? She had finished her project. We had cleaned the house before the guests arrived. I had visited my grandparents last weekend. Had you finished your lunch? They had forgotten to bring their umbrellas. Had you met her before the party? She had finished her homework when her friends came over. We had played the game before it started raining. Had you seen the movie before it was released? Had she studied for the test? She had visited her friend's house recently. He had forgotten his phone at home. We had cooked dinner when the phone rang. Had you taken your dog for a walk before? I had visited that museum before it closed down. I had completed my project. Had they left for the airport before you arrived? Had she seen the latest episode already? I had never been to a live concert until last night. He had completed the puzzle. Had you studied for the test? We had learned the new song. Had she completed the project before the team meeting? He had lost his wallet at the mall. I had seen that movie before it won an Oscar. They had watched the sunrise together. They had played soccer in the park. Had you finished your lunch yet? Had you met him before he relocated to another country? He had painted the beautiful picture. She had danced at the party gracefully. She had completed her assignment. We had watched that movie before it was released on DVD. He had fixed the leak before it caused any damage. Had you finished your breakfast? We had visited the zoo last month. He had fixed the car before it broke down again. He had fixed the broken bike skillfully. She had already eaten lunch. He had bought the tickets before they sold out. I had never seen a shooting star until last night. I had finished my work on time. Had they visited the famous landmark? Had they taken their dog for a walk before? We had found the lost keys quickly. We had already left the party. We had traveled to many countries. They had visited their grandparents. Had she read that book before? We had played soccer before it got too dark. Had you finished your chores? She had read the book before the movie was released. They had cleaned their room. I had visited that city before it became popular. She had studied for the exam before she got sick. Had she seen the latest episode? Had you watched the show before it ended? We had visited the zoo before it closed for the day. Had she finished her project before the deadline? We had already arrived at the airport. They had attended the concert last night. We had found the lost dog. He had forgotten his keys. She had studied English for 2 years. She had already taken a shower. They had played video games all day. I had talked to him yesterday. He had fixed the leaky faucet. She had prepared the delicious meal. She had visited her grandparents over the weekend. She had finished her work when her colleague arrived. Had she finished her painting before the art show? Had they taken their dog for a walk? He had eaten dinner before he went to the party. He had bought the car before the price increased. He had finished his homework already. They had cleaned their messy room completely. Had you read this book before? He had repaired the broken toy. I had read the book last night. We had traveled to Europe before. They had attended the concert. We had traveled to different countries last year. We had watched that movie before. Had they left for the airport before you came? We had found the lost dog finally. I had visited my grandparents last Sunday. Had you seen that show before it was cancelled? We had read the book before it became a bestseller. I had read the book last week. We had lived in that house for 5 years. She had prepared a delicious meal. We had traveled to many countries last year. They had gone to the beach yesterday. We had seen that movie before it came out on DVD. Had she finished her project before the presentation? He had already bought the tickets. We had arrived at the airport early. Had they left for the concert before you called? Had she seen that movie in the theater? We had visited the zoo recently. She had danced beautifully at the recital. They had cleaned their messy room. She had finished her assignment on time. Had she learned how to swim before joining the swim team? They had finished their work when the boss arrived. Had you seen the movie before it won an award? We had met each other before. She had finished her project successfully. Had they visited the new museum? They had gone to the beach. We had played soccer before it started getting dark. They had played football before it started raining. She had visited her grandparents last summer. They had watched the movie before it started raining. I had played tennis yesterday. I had visited my friend in the hospital. I had completed my project successfully. She had cooked dinner for her family. Had you studied for the test before you took it? Had she finished her work before the team meeting? Had she finished her presentation before the meeting? I had seen that movie before it won an award. Had they finished the project on time? They had never seen a dolphin before. They had played soccer before it started getting dark. I had watched the movie before it ended. I had never been to a comedy show until last weekend. He had fixed the issue before it caused further problems. Had you seen that movie before it was released? They had completed the puzzle before the timer ran out. She had studied for the test before she got the results. We had cooked dinner when the power went out. He had fixed the broken chair. She had read the book before the author's book tour. They had watched the sunset on the beach. I had seen that movie before it ended. She had sung a song at the talent show. She had learned how to play the piano skillfully. They had cleaned their room thoroughly. By the time they arrived, we had already left the party. They had visited the park before it closed. They had gone camping in the mountains. I had visited my friend last month. We had gone shopping earlier. Had she read that book? We had visited the park before it closed for the day. He had forgotten his phone at home again. Had you seen that show before it got cancelled? Had you seen that famous actor before watching that movie? He had fixed the broken bike. She had prepared a surprise for her parents' anniversary. I had finished my homework. He had received a gift from his friend. Had you read the book before the author's interview? He had already finished his homework. He had painted a stunning picture. I had visited that city before it was hit by the storm. We had visited the museum before it opened to the public. Had she finished her speech before the event started? We had traveled to different countries. She had learned how to play the piano. She had studied for the exam before she fell sick. Had they visited the famous landmark yet? Had you read the article before the discussion? They had gone to the park. They had played video games all day long. They had seen that movie twice. He had eaten lunch before he went to the meeting. They had visited the museum before it closed. Had they visited the new museum yet? He had already bought a new car. She had finished her work before the meeting. We had seen that movie twice. We had already left the cinema. He had already completed his homework. He had received a letter from his pen pal. The train had left when I arrived. Had you seen that famous painting before? He had fixed the broken chair perfectly. They had seen a shooting star. She had danced at the party. He had eaten breakfast before he went to work. He had already bought the new game. I had finished my work before the deadline. Had they seen that famous painting before? Had you met him before he moved to another country?